So we've got 5 ladies for you this morning. The first lady that we're going to have works for ARIP, as you can see down the bottom there. Priyani is an engineer, and as you can see, with an economics background, and is working as a water engineer in Melbourne. So like most of our, obviously, speakers this morning, obviously had a love of maths and science, but obviously I'll let her speak to more of that. She says here that her Year 9 maths teacher told her that she should do engineering, and with that, her future was set. She went and did a Bachelor of Commerce with Economics and a Master's of Engineering at the University of Melbourne. And then it was in her university years that she began her volunteering with Engineers Without Borders, where she obviously could see the power of engineering and the practical uses in her job. And she's been with ARIP since 2015, and she's worked on obviously a range of projects there. So I might pass over to Priyani.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jessica. And hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here and see so many faces. So my name's Priyani and I work at ARIP, which is a engineering company in Melbourne, as a water engineer. So today I'll talk to you about my career and my career as an engineer and what led me here and why I absolutely love it. I guess the purpose of this slide is to show how multifaceted a engineer or anyone in their career can be. And I think that there's like these stereotypes of what engineers or what certain types of careers have, and I remember I'll actually show you a slide in a second, which I was talking about where, there's this kind of idea of what a scientist should be, which is like a crazy old man with like white hair. And I guess this is just to show that, there's no one way to be anything, and there's no one way to be an engineer as well. And I think becoming an engineer helped me realize that the different areas of my personality and how I could express that in the career that I'm in. So just go to the next slide. So actually last year, one of my mentors told me that this is that I guess what makes an ideal job. And before I jump into my background, I guess I just wanted to just give this piece of advice is that there's firstly, you love doing it and it makes a difference. You're good at it and also you're financially stable. And I think, there'll be times where all of these 4 things don't hit, and there'll be times when, some of these areas are hitting more than others. So, where maybe there's a job that you don't really enjoy that much, but it's making a difference, or you're good at it, or it's, good for money. But I think that the ideal job, I guess, is this. And I think that for me, I've been really lucky that I feel like, especially at the moment, that my job as a water engineer hits all of these 4 criteria for me. And I think for me, this, it making a difference, that's something that really is really important for me. And I'll just go into the next slide and give a bit of a background. So growing up in Melbourne, I was always, I guess I had like different parts of my personality and who I was, and I was, figuring out who I was, and there's, I guess there's different parts of me. So there was a part of me that was just absolutely loved maths. So you can see the little math stroke there. That's an ode to my love of maths. And really loved, so I did, like 9-10 months when, I started doing VC maths when I was in, I think, year 9, and just really loved science as well, chemistry, physics. But I also loved other subjects as well. I was also really creative. I wasn't as good as being creative as I was at maths, but I still really liked it. And also that oak tree there is actually, I couldn't find a better photo, but it was about how the other part of me is that I started volunteering when I was 12 at the Oak Tree Foundation, which started at my school around the same time as I started at high school. And so I started volunteering at a really young age because I was really driven to make a difference. I'd been to India. My cultural background is Indian, and so I'd been to India a number of times. And I guess seeing that kind of the jarring difference between Melbourne and India, I really was driven to make a difference. And then also you'll see on the left that image transforming an image of little men in white coats. So that was the article that was published when I was in year 11. So many years ago now. I went to the National Youth Science Forum when I was in high school, and this article was published because I was talking about how, yeah, I guess just like I was keen to become an engineer, and that it's that whole stereotype that I just mentioned, you know, that stereotype doesn't it kind of still does exist anymore, but you know, we're working to break that down, and that's not what it should be. And I guess for me, I found that in engineering, all of these different parts of me, I'm able to express them. Um, so it was actually when I was at university that I started volunteering with Engineers Without Borders, and I learned the practical uses of engineering and how I could combine my skills and use them to make a difference. So this quote has always really stuck with me because, you know, it's yeah, doctors save lives, engineers save communities, and it's about how powerful engineering is. And I'll talk to some of the projects I've worked on in a moment. But the difference that we have to make a difference in communities and the potential you can have to change entire communities with, you know, basic infrastructure, water, transport. You know, water is so essential, and so many communities around the world and even in Australia don't have access to clean drinking water. And that with clean drinking water, you know, you can change the health and hygiene of entire communities. Um, so since it was actually since 2014 that I started working at Arup, and I've worked on a wide range of technical projects. I've designed pipelines. I'm working on designing treatment plants and treatment processes, pumps, modeling of large water networks, and then also with my economics background, I've undertaken a lot of strategy projects as well. So looking at like long-term planning for cities and long-term drought planning. So at the moment, I'm working a lot with Sydney Water around planning for drought, which is really interesting using my skills in that kind of, I guess, creative way as well, looking at the long term and how do we prepare for the long term with what we have now. But I think one of the most interesting projects that I've worked on, which I'll talk about today, is a project based in Far North Queensland. And as I said, I'm really passionate about using my skills to create a better world. And as a water engineer, I personally feel that like it's just an amazing way to do that. And so it was an opportunity that came up in 2015 to work on this project at work, which I leapt on because I absolutely was just so inspired by it. And I guess just for a bit of a background, so the project is based in Port Stewart, which is you can see on the screen this little white dot there, which is about a 11-hour drive from Cairns. So it's very remote. It's approximately 400 kilometers north of Cairns. And the Lama Lama community there, so there's an Aboriginal community there that haven't had access to clean drinking water, didn't have access to clean drinking water since 2006. So flooding from a cyclone destroyed the water system. And then since then, they've been using these improvised arrangements you can see. So there's like a hand dug little kind of pond where you can see the dogs swimming in. And then there's also the bucket, which is what they had the temporary diesel pump. So there was obviously a lot of issues. There was high levels of iron and E. coli, which can make you really sick. And also the iron is really red. So the community was just like, you know, obviously not happy with it. And were falling sick because of the levels of E. coli. And those temporary arrangements were in place for over a decade. And then because of the arrangement that the company that I work for has with Engineers Without Borders and relationships with the community there, the community approached us to help with the project, and we gave our services for free actually. So the way that it works is, so I was still paid for it, but the company kind of donates our time to work on this project. And so I was required to, so I worked on this to provide detailed designs of how we could treat the water and different ways of pumping the water from the river to the community so that there was more of a long-term solution, because they found that because of the temporary arrangements of that diesel pump, I'll just go back, that they would, when during the winter time when the river floods, they would have to go into the river and restart the pump like 6 or 7 times a day. There was crocodiles there as well, so there was lots of different constraints in this area. There was no services, no electricity. It was required to run on solar. And there was also, the community is not, they don't have a lot of technical training, so it had to be minimum maintenance. There was a lot of constraints, and we actually designed a system that met all these constraints and worked really closely with the community to do that. And this is some examples of some of the drawings. So these are, I guess, these are detailed design drawings that engineers do. I'm not sure if you've seen this before, but this was the pump system. So there's like, so the pump, you can see where my mouse is. It's submerged diagonally into the riverbed so that it's protected from, if there's like another cyclone or flooding, because it's under the riverbed, it's protected from the environment. And you can see in this bottom drawing here, the bedrock and so this is under the riverbank, and this is the pump coming in here. So there's kind of like a natural filtration. I think in your session this afternoon, you'll be working on some filters. But so here you can see there's gravel and there's stones and there's backfill. And so that's kind of like already a natural filter for the water coming in. So it's already cleaner than what it would have been if it was above the riverbed, which it was originally. And then you can see as well here, so some distance from the river, so it's about 10 meters, you can use a pulley to pull the pump up if you need to maintain it. So instead of going into the river, which is what they did in the winter when it was flooding and when there's crocodiles, you can actually maintain it from some distance away. So that's the system that we had for the pump in the river. And then, so these are some 3D drawings as well of the filter system, and so the treatment system that we were working on. So the drawings in like the goldy greeny color, so that's the existing infrastructure, and then the black is the new infrastructure that we proposed. So this system here is the new system that we proposed, which was a iron filter, and so this filters out the iron from the water, and it does it using, so it doesn't have any chemicals or any electricity. It's based off of the pressure from the pump. So the water is coming at such a high pressure that it goes through, and it goes through, I'm not sure if you've learned about the Venturi effect, but it's basically, it goes through like a hole like this big. So it's very small, and it goes through at a very high pressure. So that means that the water is oxidized. So the iron then oxidizes, which means that it like solidifies. So originally it's dissolved in the water, but because it's coming at such a high pressure, it solidifies, and then it gets filtered out. So then that's how it's filtered out of the water. And then it goes into this tank here, the clean water, and then there's this shed here which has a pump in it, and then this pumps the water up to this high level tank, and then it goes to the lower tank, and then it, by gravity, then it goes to the community. So that's the design that we worked on. And then our design actually enabled the community to source over $300,000 in funding. And because that, I guess this often happens in remote Aboriginal communities where the water is just not not provided for, not up to scratch, and the council wasn't really doing anything. So they were able to source the funding, and it was constructed in 2018. So that's me up there actually. We helped commission the system and then worked with the local community and local rangers to train them on how to maintain and operate the system. And they were really stoked about it because obviously they hadn't had clean drinking water since 2006, and water is such obviously an essential service, but also really important in Aboriginal culture. And we had one of the elders that was so invested in the system kind of bless the system, and it was really beautiful going up there. And I think that's, for me, one of the best projects I've worked on, because it's using my technical skills as an engineer but applying it in a context that really is making a difference. I'll just skip quickly through the next ones because I'm aware of time, but there was another project I worked on, which was also in Far North Queensland, and so this was for the Torres Strait Islands. We worked on the islands have significant water issues as well. So this was not a pro bono one. This is one where we worked for the Torres Strait Islands Regional Council. And so this was one where it was less of a design project, more of like, I guess, using that creative side of being an engineer. And the islands have very complex water systems. Each of the 15 islands have their own water treatment and water sources, and they're all very remote. These are some of the islands here. And so we worked closely with the council to help them make a 25-year plan on how to meet the Australian water drinking guidelines, and also to make sure there's enough water, because 6 months of the year during the dry season, a lot of the islands just run out of water and they have to have like temporary arrangements, which is really expensive and not environmentally friendly. And so this snapshot here of this graph is an example of one of the models that I developed to model the water over the course of 20 years. And so you can see, like the times it runs out. And then we also modeled if there was new infrastructure, what difference that would make. So this is a really good example of combining maths and engineering, but also with creativity and working closely with the council. And I guess just some other perks of being an engineer. So being an engineer has taken me to places all around the world. This is me and my sister in London. So I went to London for work. In Toronto. This was actually up in Far North Queensland at the Llama Llama community, Alice Springs. And the other thing is I also lived in Auckland for a year and a half with work. So this is me and one of my friends in Auckland. And so I was there and I worked on some water projects while I was in Auckland. And this is not overseas, this is in Cairns, but I lived in Cairns for a couple of months while I was working on some of these projects. And the other thing, which I've mentioned as well, is making a difference. So I've done a lot of volunteering with Engineers Without Borders locally in Melbourne, so working with refugee communities and working on bike programs. But I've also run, so this is in Cambodia, where I ran some design summits, so working with engineering students at university and communities in Cambodia. And and this is up in Far North Queensland. And and I guess I was just thinking about, all the different parts of being an engineer and all the different parts of me that I bring to it as well. And I guess, I always thought I was really different and didn't fit in. And I think that the best part about being an engineer is all of these things that you can have fun, you can see the world, you apply your skills in a really practical way. But you can also express yourself in, in creative ways and academic ways. And you get to work with really great people.
Thank you so much. All right. It's amazing. There's so many, obviously avenues where everyone can end up and go, and it's great to hear. Even in the world of engineering, my dad's an engineer, but he's an electrical engineer, so completely different. And there are so many, obviously, avenues and places you can end up. So thank you for that, especially seeing all those beautiful photos of all the traveling. Certainly makes it very, very appealing.